In Ecuador, presidential candidate Luisa Gonzales of the Citizens' Revolution movement reiterated that she will contest the results of the elections that gave the victory to President Daniel Noboa. Russian President Vladimir Putin welcomed Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi to the Kremlin for talks on Iran's nuclear program. And in Sudan, clashes over the capture of the city of Al-Fasher, capital of North Darfur state, left at least 130 dead and dozens wounded. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We'll begin with the news. In Ecuador, presidential candidate Luisa Gonzales of the Citizens' Revolution movement reiterated that she will contest the results of the elections that gave the victory to President Daniel Noboa. On a video published Wednesday night on her social media, she thanked her voters, adding that what happened in the runoff election was a serious attack against the legal and constitutional order of the country. Gonzales accused Noboa of the use of public resources, of the delivery of bonuses without technical support, and also referred to some irregularities as multiple versions of tally sheets that were modified by the National Electoral Council itself, tally sheets without signatures, and sums that do not coincide with the turnout. In this sense, she warned that all these findings will be challenged and contested before the competent authorities in Ecuador.
Quiero comunicar al país y al mundo entero que todos estos
I want to communicate to the country and to the whole world that all these very serious findings will be challenged and contested before the competent authorities, which today, unfortunately, are under the control of those who govern, as well as of all the legal institutions that assist us. This in order to prevent Ecuador from becoming a country without peace, without freedom, without democracy, in the midst of a persecution against those of us who have had the courage to raise our voices and who today have more than 1 million votes scandalously snatched in an unfair, unequal election never seen in our history.
Desigual y jamás vista en nuestra historia.
And in addition, Gonzales further denounced the electoral fraud committed by Daniel Noboa after a campaign plagued by irregularities.
Causa por esta lucha que me impulsa a
For this cause, for this struggle that impels me to think of the most needy, of the poorest, is that I see myself in the obligation to denounce the serious attack that our country suffers, trampled in its legal and constitutional order. This campaign plagued with irregularities began with the fact that Mr. Noboa campaigned without a license, continued with the seizure of electoral institutions that illegally allowed the indiscriminate use of public resources for an open campaign by the government in office. Millionaire bonds were also delivered without technical analysis as a populist strategy to buy votes, which today puts dollarization at risk, changes of electoral precincts and last-minute states of exception. In short, we can point out an endless number of infractions committed by those who today have taken power under the fictitious shadow of democracy.
Ha tomado el poder bajo la ficticia sombra de la democracia.
These regard national and international organizations and movements have also denounced an electoral fraud in the Ecuadorian elections, demanding a recount of the votes by the National Electoral Council. Gabriela Mena has the details.
En Ecuador, el fraude electoral es denunciado.
In Ecuador, political organizations, social movements, and legal groups have denounced electoral fraud, warning about irregularities in the process that gave Noboa the victory. They emphasize that there was a manipulation of minutes and irregular prohibitions to disrespect the will of the Ecuadorian people.
In addition, on this occasion, there was no opportunity for the citizens to photograph the votes, and this, of course, is the result of the distrust that the Ecuadorian people have in their president of the republic. We are living before the state of caprice, and this cannot be given in the legal system.
Y eso no se puede dar en el ordenamiento jurídico.
Punto en que coinciden varios analistas y organizaciones
Point on which several analysts and political organizations agree. From the beginning and after the conclusion of the elections in Ecuador, the citizen revolution rejected the electoral results and denounced fraud, affirming that they did not remain with their arms crossed. But what are the ways that must be complied with to denounce electoral fraud? First, a political actor must present a denunciation before the National Electoral Council. This document must be supported by arguments, photographs, testimonies, and reports that validate the irregularities, and in a period of up to 1 year the ruling can be announced. For the analyst Ramiro Rivadeneira, this would not allow Noboa to be sworn in this May 24th.
sea posesionado este 24 de mayo.
Me queda claro que se trata de un fraude.
It is clear to me that we are dealing with a much more complex fraud than what could exist with respect to the accounting of certain votes. It is not only a question of numbers, it is not only a question of accounts. Behind this there is an accumulation, a lot of edges that have to be analyzed, and from there it is important to open the minutes.
Tienen que analizar y desde ahí es importante abrir las actas.
El Tribunal Contencioso Electoral, previo a hacer la
The
proclamación.
contentious electoral tribunal, prior to making the proclamation of the official results, must resolve the illegalities committed by Noboa, starting with the lack of request for a license to the National Assembly to initiate the campaign period. He did not entrust the presidency to Veronica Abad, the use of state funds for campaigning, and the declaration of a state of exception just hours before the beginning of the election day.
Sin embargo, el tribunal lo que ha hecho para de alguna manera.
However, what the court has done to somehow say that it is doing its job is to channel several of these complaints into one. Of these 5, there is still no definitive resolution to tell us what has happened.
Definitiva, que nos diga qué mismo ha pasado.
Es necesario mencionar que a este cúmulo de ilegalidades
It is necessary to mention that, to this accumulation of illegalities, it has added the implementation of a law by the National Electoral Council and at the same time denied the possibility to Ecuadorians to exercise their right to vote from abroad, in countries such as Venezuela, where Luisa Gonzales had a high number of supporters.
Todas estas cosas hacen un contexto de que los resultados.
All these things make a context in which the final results are bulky. They do not make any statistical sense. In all this context, it seems to me that what is really responsible is that people do question how this type of issues could have occurred.
Cuestione cómo se pudieron dar este tipo de temas.
expertos cuestionan si las autoridades
Experts question whether the authorities will act legitimately without tipping the balance in favor of Noboa and not declaring fraud. And the fact is that unions denounce that Noboa has the powers of the state monopolized.
Gabriela Mena, TeleSUR Ecuador.
And Puerto Rico experienced a massive power outage on Wednesday that affected over 1 million customers. On Thursday morning, Puerto Rico Governor Jennifer González Colón said in a press conference that the blackout was caused by a transmission failure and that power has yet to be restored to more than 50% of the island. In addition, Colón assured that most hospitals were functional, with some being connected to generators, stressing there has been no decrease in their service or operations. For their part, Luma Energy, the power company servicing the Caribbean nation, admitted in a statement that the work to restore electricity among those affected could take between 48 and 72 hours. We have a first break now. We're going to be right back. Welcome back. The multinational security support mission in Haiti has received additional personnel with the arrival of new agents from Jamaica. The reinforcement will attempt to curb the violent attacks from criminal groups that have generated a serious disruption of the social, political, and economic life in the country. This is the second Jamaican contingent that joins the troops commanded by Kenya in this Caribbean nation. The first landing took place at the Toussaint Louverture International Airport in Port-au-Prince, the country's capital, and was comprised of 24 soldiers and policemen who landed on September 12, 2024. In El Salvador on Wednesday, United States Senator Chris Van Hollen was denied a visit with Salvador migrant Kilmar Abreu Garcia, wrongly deported to the Latin American nation under Trump administration's orders. Precisely, Salvadoran Vice President Felix Ulloa reportedly confirmed to Van Hollen that Abrego Garcia remains detained at the high security center SICOT, not due to crimes, but at the request of the United States government. The Maryland senator, who also co-chairs the Senate's Foreign Policy Committee, intended to visit the deportee at the center and demand his return to the U.S. state. In this context, Van Hollen ratified to the press Abrego Garcia had been illegally abducted since no crime has been proven against him.
Okay. I'm asking President Bukele, under his authority as president of El Salvador, to do the right thing and allow Mr. Abrego Garcia to walk out of a prison, a man who's charged with no crime, convicted of no crime, and who was illegally abducted from the United States.
And Venezuela's under temporary protected status in the United States accused Secretary of State Marco Rubio of treason on Wednesday after he endorsed the termination of the program. In this regard, the head of the Venezuelan American Caucus, Adelis Ferro, asserted that the Secretary of State has requested Homeland Security Secretary Chris Noem through a letter to terminate the TPS for over 600,000 Venezuelans. Ferro stated the petition was a rude awakening for them since in March 2022, Rubio had encouraged the Biden administration to extend TPS protections for Venezuelans. The letter released this month made Venezuelans notice the hardline stance taken by Rubio, far-right parliamentarians, and opposition leader Maria Corina Machado. The president of China, Xi Jinping, arrived Thursday in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, to strengthen bilateral ties on his official visit. President Xi plans to meet with King Shihamoni, Senate President Hun Sen, and Prime Minister Hun Manet. The Chinese head of state further highlighted his will to enrich the China-Cambodia Diamond Hexagon Cooperation Framework. Likewise, the leader commended the rapid economic growth of that country thanks to the implementation of its Pentagonal strategy. Overall, President Xi Jinping underscored that both nations were on the track of broadening mutual cooperation, ensuring greater security, and contributing more to peace and stability worldwide. Russian President Vladimir Putin welcomed Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi to Kremlin for talks on Iran's nuclear program. Araghchi, who arrived in Moscow for a two-day official visit, is also expected to hold talks with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov on Friday. In addition, it was unveiled earlier by Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov that Araghchi would deliver the Russian president a message from Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The visit comes less than a week after Iranian and U.S. officials held talks in Oman, the highest-level meeting between the two sides since U.S. President Donald Trump abandoned a landmark nuclear deal in 2018 during his first term in office. And in a previous gathering, the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi met with Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, to demand guarantees for the safety of its facilities and impartiality in the agency's compliance with its responsibilities, regardless of external political pressures. The petition comes as an attempt to defuse tensions raised by the U.S. and Israeli governments, which had issued threats to Tehran to force Iranian authorities to meet their demands on nuclear energy. We now have a second short break coming up. We're going to be right back. Welcome back. Israel committed a new massacre by shelling the tents of displaced people in Al-Mawasi, west of Han Yunis, in the southern Gaza Strip. According to the Gaza Civil Defense, more than 15 bodies were recovered, most of them children. In addition, dozens of people were wounded and many of the bodies of martyrs were burned. It is important to note that Israel continues to commit massacres against civilians in the Gaza Strip, shelling inhabited buildings, displaced persons' tents, and hospitals in the midst of a constant siege that causes a daily increase in the number of martyrs and wounded.
We didn't notice until the fire spread to 4 tents, and we went out with the neighbors to put out the fire. We tried to put it out with water and sand. We saved what we could, but the fire brigade was late in arriving. We took out all the charred bodies, some of them disabled. Ahmed, a disabled child, and Ramzi Arbu Ol Rouse, an elderly woman with a wheelchair, in addition to 3 others women, and 8 others children. They had claimed it was a safe area, but there is no safe area.
And Yemeni forces have succeeded in making their plan to support the Palestinian cause affect world trade as traffic through Egypt's Suez Canal has reportedly fallen by 50% so far in 2025. This was confirmed by the head of the Suez Canal Authority, Osama Rabi, who stressed that the Yemeni forces' incursions in solidarity with the population of the Gaza Strip have forced many ships of different flags to change their course. For their part, the Ansar-Rolla movement has ratified that as soon as Washington, London and Tel Aviv stop killing Palestinians in Gaza, the ships will be able to sail in peace along East Coast. And in Sudan, clashes over the capture of the city of Al-Fasher, capital of North Darfur state, left at least 130 dead and dozens wounded. In this regard, the nation's armed forces informed through a communique that the rapid support forces had repeatedly shelled the city, causing the death of civilians, among them women and children. In this context, experts emphasize that the paramilitaries are trying to take over the coast of Al-Fasher to turn it into the seat of their parallel government, since they control the 5 states of Darfur. Niger registers new clashes between the National Army and Islamist groups. The army reported that after military operations in the regions of Tillaberi and Terra, they cleared 2 alleged Islamist groups. The military also said that 6 members of an alleged Islamic cell were killed near the border with Burkina Faso and 3 others in the Terra region in the town of Garbuña in the west of the country. These operations are part of the regional security strategies between Niger, Mali and Burkina Faso, member nations of the Alliance of Sahel States, to combat terrorist groups within their territories and near their borders. And more than 1 million people have been displaced in the Democratic Republic of the Congo as a result of armed violence in the nation. The United Nations Children's Fund emphasized that civilians have abandoned their homes in the midst of the clashes between the army and the M23 rebel group in the province of Ituri, North and South Kivu. The entity pointed out that among the displaced there are at least 400,000 children as a result of the violence. In this sense, UNICEF warned several days ago that minors could represent 45% of the almost 10,000 cases of rape and sexual violence. And in the Vatican City, Easter week activities started with the celebration of the Holy Thursday Chrism Mass to bless the oils to be used in ceremonies in Rome parishes throughout the year. Thousands of faithful, including over 1,000 priests, took part in the ceremony in St. Peter's Basilica, which was not attended by Pope Francis, who is still recovering from a life-threatening bout of double pneumonia. The ceremony was instead offered by Cardinal Domenico Calcagno, retired head of the Vatican's Patrimony Office. Pope Francis is expected to remain largely on the sidelines during the week, as cardinals were designated to take his place presiding over the most important liturgical services leading up to Easter. The Swiss, French and Italian Alps suffer heavy snowfalls that affected traffic and electricity service. In this regard, French authorities warn of the possibility of avalanches in the Savoy region, where at least 4,000 homes were left without power and several roads were affected. In Switzerland, the government declared a special status for the meteorological event to speed up the deployment of emergency services and the mobilization and delivery of resources, also urging the population to take shelter. While in Italy, roads in the metropolitan city between Turin and Aosta remain closed due to the threat of falling trees after winds of more than 100 kilometers per hour. Like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find more on our website at telesurenglish.net and also join us on our social media. For teleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thanks for watching.